Hi, guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Vijeta, and today we shall be starting with the history of Henry VII, another work by Bacon. So, it was written in 1622 and it marked a new era in English historiography, blended elements of Italian Renaissance and classical antiquity. The essays, written in 1595, 1612, and 1625, they have like three editions, and these are the years of those editions. First edition of 1595, 10 essays were published, including Christian Meditations and Of the Colors of Good and Evil. Second, second edition in 1612, it consisted 38 essays, including Of Death, of Religion, of Life, of Nobility, of Dispatch, of Friendship, of Ambition, of Young Men and Age, of Beauty, of Nature in Men, of Custom and Education, of Fortune, of Vainglory, of Praise, etc. The third edition of 1625 consisted of 58 essays, including Of Truth, of Revenge, of Adversity, of Simulation and Dissimulation, of Envy, of Boldness, of Travel, of Delays, of Innovation, of Suspicion, of Plantation, of Prophecies, etc. Full title is Essays, Religious Meditation Places of Persuasion and Dissuasion. It's Persuasion and Dissuasion, but it's Old English, Seen and Allowed. History of Life and Death. It is a treatise or treatise on medicine with observations, natural and experimental, for the prolonging of life. The Wisdom of the Ancients, 1609, De Sapientia Venterum. Yeah, it's Latin. It is it was published in Latin. It unveils the hidden meanings and teachings behind ancient Greek fables. The Wisdom of the Ancients, that is the work that I talked about. Now, the book opens with two dedications. First one is Earl of Salisbury and University of Cambridge Meditation Sacrae, 1597. It is a collection of religious meditations and quotations, very important, from essays of Bacon. Unmarried men are best friends, best masters, best servants, but not always best subjects of marriage and single life. Wives are young men's mistress, companion for middle ages, and muses for old, of marriage and single life. Studies serve for delight, for ornament, and for ability of studies. Reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man of studies. Crafty condemn studies, simple men admire them, and wise men use them of studies. Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested of studies. History maketh man wise, poets witty, the mathematics subtle natural, philosophy deep, moral grave, logic and rhetoric able to be centered of studies. Read not to contradict, nor to believe, but to weigh and consider of studies. Men in great place are thrice servants: servant of the sovereign or state, servants of fame, and servants of business, of great place. Very impactful quotes. It were better to have no opinion of God at all than such as opinion as is unworthy of him, of superstition. Very beautiful. Since custom is the principal magistrate of man's life, let man by all means endeavor to obtain good customs, of custom and education. Beauty is as summer fruits, which are easy to corrupt and cannot taste, and for the most part it makes a dissolute youth and an age a little out of countenance of beauty. Certainty it is heaven upon earth to have a man, mind move in charity, rest in providence, and turn upon the poles of truth. Of truth. Children sweeten labors, but they make misfortunes even better, more bitter. They increase the cares of life, but they mitigate the remembrance of death. Lookers on many times see more than the gamesters. God Almighty first planted a garden, and it is indeed the purest of human pleasures of gardens. So we finish with Francis Bacon and we come to the metaphysical poets. Now, during the late 16th century and early 17th century, the Elizabethan poetry exhausted itself. The people were no more interested in Elizabethan writers, so a new school of poetry emerged, known as Metaphysical School of Poetry. Drummond, in 1585 to 1649, that is his lifeline, he was the first writer to use the term metaphysics. But it was John Dryden who used this term in English literature while indicating to John Donne as Donne affects the metaphysics not only in his satires but in his amorous verses. Dr. Samuel Johnson is the first to use metaphysical school of poetry in his work, Lives of the Most Eminent English Poets, in the chapter Abraham Cowley, where he wrote, "At the beginning of 17th century, there appeared a race of writers that may be termed the metaphysical poets." Metaphysical poets were not said to be great writers because they did not fulfill the Aristotelian concept of poetry as an imitative act. They did not imitate anything. They were not writing to please anyone or to instruct, but to create suspense or mystery and to achieve their aim. They employed conceits. Dryden said, "Donne must be a great poet, but he is not a good writer." T.S. Eliot wrote a critical essay, The Metaphysical Poet. And now we come to the list of metaphysical poets, who are Andrew Marvell, John Donne, George Herbert, Richard Crashaw, Thomas Cardew, Abraham Cowley, Henry Vaughan. Very important. These were the poets. Now we come to the characteristics of metaphysical poetry. Noble thought, diction, and action. Their thought and ideas were unique. They did not imitate anything. Walter Scott says, "The metaphysicals played with thoughts as Elizabethan had played with words. Their ideas and thoughts were unique." T.S. Eliot said, "In metaphysicals, unification of sensibility is perceived for the first time." And frequent use of conceits was the order of the day. They have used conceits again and again. Conceit is far fetched imagery such as compass, oh my America. These were the pieces in which conceit was used. Learnedness of unconventionality, that was another thing. Dr. Johnson said, "Metaphysicals were the men of learning, and to show their learning was their whole endeavor. They copied neither nature nor life." Love affection or hyperbole and colloquialism, that was also one important factor. Metaphysical poetry mainly deals with the theme of love, in which poetry has variously used hyperboles. That is something. John Donne was born in London in a Catholic family. In 1601, he married Anne More. Now we come to John Donne, and who was born in London in a Catholic family. He was one of the metaphysical poets. In 1601, he married Anne More, the niece of his patron, and was imprisoned for elopement. Sir Robert Drury was his patron. In 1621, he was made the Dean of St. Paul Church. He was persecuted for being a Catholic and was debarred from taking a university degree and from a public career. Later, he changed to an Anglican in 1615 on the order of King James I. None of his poetry was published during his lifetime, which is actually true for a lot of poets. He wrote satires, elegies, epigraphs, verse letters, songs and sonnets, and holy sonnets. In one of his elegiac poems, To His Mistress Going to Bed, he compares the fondling of his mistress to the exploration of America. And he says, "License my roving hands and let them go, before, behind, between, above, below. O my America, my newfound land, my kingdom safest when with one unmanned." So, that is something. This elegy opens with, "Come, madam, come all, rest my powers defy, until I labor, I in labor lie." Upon the insistence of James I, Donne entered Anglican priesthood. He's known for moving sermons and religious poems. So yeah, he had quite a shift from amorous sonnets to religious sermons. But yeah, he wrote 19 holy sonnets, also called Divine Meditations. Title of Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls and Thomas Merton's No Man is an Island are taken from Donne's Divine Meditation 17. For his patron Robert Drury, Donne wrote two anniversary poems: An Anatomy of the World in 1611, Of the Progress of the Soul in 1612. In 1610 and 1611, he wrote two anti Catholic polemics: Pseudomartyr, 1610, Ignatius's Conclave, 1611. Ben Jonson criticized him, saying, Donne, for not keeping of accent, deserves hanging. Yeah, that's very popular because you see his rhythm resembled a casual speech, and that was not acceptable at that time. Donne served in the Parliament as a member of the Parliament in 1601 and 1614. Isaac Walton wrote the biography of Donne. Donne's wife Anne died in 1617 while giving birth to her 12th child. Donne mourned deeply and wrote of his love and loss in his 17 holy sonnets. In Elegy 8, he compared the gap between his lover's breasts to the Hellespont. He wrote An Anatomy of the World in 1611 in the memory of Elizabeth Drury, daughter of his patron, Sir Robert Drury. He wrote a poem, A Nocturnal upon St. Lucy's Day, being the shortest day in 1627 on the death of his friend Lucy, Countess of Bedford, and his daughter Lucy Donne. So, yeah, these are some of the snippets about John Donne's life, the metaphysical poets, and Francis Bacon's works, mostly his essays. I hope you liked my video. Like, share, and subscribe. And I will meet you all with more knowledge and more literature in the next video. Thank you.